Okay, what if I told you that the world's first great novel, I'm talking a huge, sprawling epic about love, power, and art, was written over 1,000 years ago? Today, we're going to dive into one of history's most important and, let's be real, one of its most intimidating masterpieces, the Tale of Genji.
Just let that sink in for a second. The first real novel, a story with deep psychological characters that could honestly be a bestseller today, wasn't written by some famous philosopher in ancient Greece or Rome. Nope, it was written by a Japanese noblewoman living in the imperial court over a millennium ago. That one fact alone completely flips the script on what we think we know about literary history. So let's get into it.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the book's incredible origins. Then, we'll meet the Shining Prince himself. After that, we'll follow his dramatic fall from grace and his big comeback. We'll also explore the wild world of court politics he had to navigate. And finally, we'll ask why this story still matters so much today. Okay, first things first, let's set the scene. We're traveling back in time to Heian-era Japan. This was an age of unbelievable artistic beauty and very, very formal courtly life.
Now, the author is this brilliant woman we know as Murasaki Shikibu. She was a lady-in-waiting, which means she had a front-row seat to all the drama, gossip, and politics of the imperial court. As a member of the powerful Fujiwara clan, she saw it all, and she poured those observations into her story. By the year 1080, her novel was already a sensation in the capital. But get this, it took almost 900 years for it to be translated into English. 9 centuries. That's just wild to think about.
So, who is this epic story all about? Well, let me introduce you to a man so charismatic, so unbelievably charming, they just called him the Shining Prince.
Our hero, Hikaru Genji, is the son of the emperor and his favorite concubine, a woman named Lady Kiritsubo. But you know, court life is basically a snake pit. Because his mother wasn't a high-ranking noble, the other consorts are viciously jealous, making Genji's life dangerous from day one. So, to protect him, his father makes a huge decision. He removes Genji from the line of succession. He makes him a commoner, but one who still grows up inside the palace, a real gilded cage. And from the moment he's born, he's just perfect. He's incredibly handsome, charming, and a genius at every art form.
And this is the real magic of the book. Genji's life becomes the stage for exploring these massive universal ideas. This isn't just some historical soap opera. It's one of the first times in literature anyone took such a deep, honest look at what it means to be human.
You really can't understand Genji without understanding the women in his life. I mean, they're the ones who truly shape his destiny. You've got his forbidden love for Lady Fujitsubo, who just so happens to be his father's consort. Yikes. Then there's the intense and brilliant Lady Rokujo, whose passion turns into a dangerously destructive jealousy. And then there's Murasaki, a young girl he meets, takes in, and literally grooms to become his perfect wife. It's a lot, and it shows his desperate search for an ideal that maybe doesn't exist.
So, as you can probably imagine, a life filled with secret affairs and breaking all the rules, well, that's not going to end well, especially not in such a strict society. And this leads us to the biggest turning point in Genji's entire life.
The very charm that made Genji a star is exactly what brings him down. His affairs become too messy, too public, too scandalous. He finally pushes things too far, and that gives his political enemies the perfect excuse they've been waiting for. Just like that, the Shining Prince's entire world comes crashing down around him.
He's banished to a remote, lonely place called Suma, and the culture shock is brutal. I mean, he goes from the absolute center of the universe, a world of luxury and power, to complete and total isolation. He's stripped of everything. It's his rock bottom. But it's also where he starts to change, to really think about his life and develop a kind of humility he never ever had before.
So when the political situation changes and he's finally allowed back to the capital, he's not the same guy. He comes back without that youthful arrogance. Instead, he's got this quiet wisdom. This whole ordeal, this redemption, is really the core of his journey. Exile is what forged the charming boy into a truly powerful man.
Okay, so Genji's back, and he's wiser. But how does he navigate that same dangerous court? Well, to get his success, you have to understand the rules of the game.
Life in this court was all about appearances and artistry. I'm talking about your handwriting, the color combinations of your robes, and your ability to come up with a clever poem on the fly. Those things decided your entire social status. Honestly, the best way to think about poetry back then is to think of it as their social media. It was how you flirted, how you argued, how you shared your deepest thoughts. It was everything. And this is the world that the new and improved Genji absolutely masters. He takes his natural charm and combines it with that sharp, strategic mind he developed in exile. He becomes the Emperor's most trusted advisor, building his power not with brute force, but with taste, art, and brilliant political moves.
So now, Genji has it all. He's at the absolute peak of power and influence. But here's the question. What do you do when you've already won? This is where the story gets really profound. In his later years, Genji builds this unbelievably beautiful estate, the Rokujo-in. It's basically a perfect little world he's created for the most important women in his life. But here, at the height of his success, surrounded by all this perfection, a deep sadness starts to creep in. He watches the younger generation coming up, and it hits him. All of this, his power, his art, his loves, it's all temporary.
There's a Japanese concept that perfectly captures this feeling, and it is the key to this entire novel. It's called mono no aware. It's that gentle, bittersweet sadness you feel about the fact that nothing lasts forever. It's that ache in your heart when you see a beautiful sunset or watch cherry blossoms fall, because you know the moment is fleeting. This book is the ultimate expression of mono no aware.
And then, in a totally genius move, Murasaki Shikibu doesn't even end the book when Genji dies. The story just keeps going. It starts following his descendants as they try to live in the shadow of his legacy. It's her way of showing that life always goes on, echoing the past but always changing. It hammers home that idea that everything is beautiful because it doesn't last.
And that really brings us to the final question, doesn't it? The fancy court rituals, the poetry, that all feels like a world away. But the heart of this story, the search for connection, the pain of losing someone, the joy of love, and that beautiful sadness of a life that goes by too fast, that's completely timeless. These are the same things we all struggle with today. And that's why, 1,000 years later, the story of this shining prince still has so much to tell us about ourselves.